Hello and welcome to Romantic Readers Podcast. My name is Nicole, and as always, I am joined by my fabulous co-host, Alley. We have a very special guest for you today. You may have seen her recently. We had a big Bryceriel week, Bryce and Azriel, and one of the big leaders of that week, someone who provided an amazing literary analysis around Bryce and Azriel, was the Marvelous Mrs Meghan, who we have brought here today. Welcome. Welcome to Romantic Readers. Thank you so much for coming.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you here.
I'm thrilled. I'm pumped to be here.
So excited to have you. So, firstly, welcome. Maybe just tell us a little bit about your background. Obviously, just recently you shared about your sort of literary analysis around Bryce and Azriel, but maybe you want to take us right back to the beginning, maybe a little bit about yourself and then how you came into the world of Sarah J Maas and the shipping wars that exist now.
For sure, and are intense now. So by day, I'm a content strategist. My career's in marketing. I kind of have unintentionally, maybe by life, become a literary analyst, at least for Sarah J Maas. So I studied communications at the University of Georgia. That was my main focus, but then I also was really passionate about anthropology and archaeology and art history and mythology and classic literature. And so then as an adult, I kind of dug down into my own religious studies, and really they're all kind of parts of a whole. So they all kind of feed into each other. And it gave me this love of like narrative theory and symbolism and searching for patterns and finding common threads and putting the puzzles together. And I love stories. I love a good book. I love a good story. I love to be immersed in a story. And so all of that kind of led here. I was always
where we are now. And I think that's what so many people love about Sarah J Maas is the layers, that some people read it and they just get the very shallow overview. But if you look at it in a deeper way, particularly if you're someone that has studied literature through university or wherever else, you start to recognize, as you say, patterns and layers in the stories and different stories connecting. And obviously that is a lot of what has potentially led us here today. I think one of the really interesting things about the Bryceriel sort of group that we found is that very few people are crystal listening kind of people. Nearly everyone has got like medical backgrounds, have, working business, are doing their master's degrees. Like everyone is quite intelligent. So I think people who pick up on these patterns are the ones that are really seeing the potential for this, relationship, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts of the group.
Yeah. Okay. I want to know though, before we get too far into the deep stuff, what is the order that you read Sarah J Maas books? Because
I think this is very important
for everyone.
Yes. So I think there's a theme here. So I started with Athalar. A friend of mine gave me the first one, and I sped through them, and then I immediately went into Crescent City. And so
And did you read through Silver Flames? Like, was Silver Flames out when you read?
Okay. So I only started the books 2 years ago.
Gotcha.
So the only book that I had to wait on so far was Flame and Shadow. So and only by like 4 weeks. So I tried to hide from everything online until like I got to it, because I knew I was like, okay, everybody's gonna read through this before I can get to it. I'm gonna spoil it all. And so I think that's what makes it so clear and puts the puzzle together, is there was no time in the middle for you to
like get into other ships and like exactly 100%. Yeah.
And so it kind of laid
have you read Throne of Glass?
I just finished Throne of Glass, which is what is it my friend said? She said, Crescent City is the book series that you will get through to get to Throne of Glass, because it's going to be the most amazing. And I was like, okay. And I like Crescent City, but Throne of Glass is now is a hole in my heart.
Well, that's 100%. That's so interesting that you still picked up on these connections and you hadn't read the Throne of Glass series yet, because for most of us, it's because we've read Heir of Fire and that we see that real transition that a lot of us kind of, I think it's Aelin and Rowan that we see as one of the closest links to Bryce and Azriel. So it's interesting that you hadn't potentially read that series yet when you read Hofas. Is that right?
It is right. And so what's funny then is, as I've been reading Throne of Glass, I can see the Azriel and Bryce and Aelin and Rowan connections from the other side.
Yeah.
That's been pretty cool. but yeah, I think for me, the puzzle piece that kicked in was when they learned that they landed at Aedis's feet, and they were like pulled, and I was reading it, and by myself I went, oh my God, that's what he's doing. And then so I started flipping back, and I was like, oh, this, I don't know how you can miss it. It becomes so clear.
Yeah. It's so freaking clear. Don't know.
Exactly. Once the puzzle pieces click into place, you can't unsee it. Like, So were you always, so obviously was that the moment where you sort of, I guess you had already read the Akatar series. Had you already thought of Azriel potentially being with someone else before you kind of read the Crescent City series? Or just take us through that, or even how you felt about Hunt and things like that.
Ooh,
take us through.
I'll start with Gwen because it's less controversial than I was a Gwenriel shipper until I got through Crescent City, and which I think makes sense because I also kind of buy into the theory that Gwen is like Shadow Bryce and Hunt is like Shadow Azriel. So I kind of see how that could happen.
That's so interesting. So
when I read that, I was like, that's amazing and it's perfect. And I think though it was also, I was looking for something for Azriel. The whole time you're reading, it was like, and nobody really perfectly fit, but Gwen was the one that fit the most. Yes. And for her, it was you're the ribbon, like what is it when, like, as she's like, you're the new ribbon or whatever. That's when that clicked in my head that that might be where that was going. But the bonus chapter totally throws so many wrenches in like the Azriel ships in general.
So what did you think? So you're talking about the bonus chapter in Akatar, the with the necklace and the Elaine. Maybe take us through what your thoughts were on that.
I love the bit about, Az is the shadow singer. And so there's the singing connection there. There's the music connection there. So you can see them kind of bonding there. To me, there's the icky factor of Gwen getting the necklace that was going to be Elaine's. Like, I don't know. None of us love that.
That's not how mates behave. They don't give each other second place necklaces. Like, that is just not how mates behave.
They don't.
Sarah J Maas
they also don't check out other females when they have a mate, i.e. Hunt.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
100%. 100%.
So yeah. So I think that was and I think Azriel just so badly wants a mate, like more than anyone else.
Yeah.
I think we're looking for a mate through the Akatar series for him, with him, because he wants it so badly. And then when you get to Bryce landing in Pryceriel, those come together and you go, okay, this is that missing piece. And this is his missing piece. And this is why it's two halves of a whole.
Yes. But just to add the tragedy for Azriel, it's like he finally now, like I literally have this image in my head where I can imagine him looking at the sky and being like, where is my mate? Like, God's cauldron, where is my mate? And then Bryce literally lands at his feet. Exactly.
Yeah.
But then it gets complicated because she's like, oh no, I've already got a mate back in my other planet. And he'd be going, wait, what? Like, that can't be right. Which is
very much like Rowan. Right? Like, it's like Rowan when he was like, I already have a mate, so I can't possibly. And so I know it's a little bit different because of Mave messing with their minds and the magic and everything, but
or is it though? I mean, that's the thing, is we think that, like, Mave is Vogue. We think the Princes of Hell are Vogue. There's like potentially Mave learned the magic back on her home planet because they did it to Hunt. Because Hunt is several hundred years old. If the timelines back up, it could all actually be happening at the same time. We've talked a lot about that on this podcast, but it maybe is exactly the same. Maybe it could be exactly the same magic.
Well, and especially if you look at the fact that, like, Hunt was designed. I mean, he was made to be for Bryce, and they even say at one point that the archangels were based on the Illyrians, which I think is very important. And
agreed.
You are right. That's very true.
Yeah. I know once Alley said it to me, I suddenly realized that if the Princes of Hell are actually Valg, and it's a Valg magic that created that fake mate for Rowan, there's a possibility that they've created a fake mate for Bryce to obviously have that connection for her. And, you know, we've often told me, God, we could really go down a rabbit hole with talking about Hunt and the way that he almost siphons her power and just the amount of moments that tend to happen with Hunt. But maybe let's jump into Hunt quickly. Maybe let's share with us your thoughts on Hunt. Obviously a little controversial, but what are your thoughts on our delightful Hunt through Crescent City?
So I know I feel like nobody is just neutral about Hunt. I feel like people love Hunt or they don't love Hunt.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just can't get around this idea in my head that Hunt is like everybody's worst first boyfriend. Like,
you know, he is. Oh my God. I know.
So go back through your mind. He's not the one you mate to and marry to. But I think what threw me immediately for him was the violence of the way that like him and Bryce meet is very weird, and the stapling like of her thigh, and like she doesn't immediately go like, oh my God, that's the most amazing and beautiful man I've ever seen, and he doesn't go, oh my God, that's the most beautiful female I've ever seen, and that alone is weird if they are true fated mates. But there, every time he sees another beautiful woman, he is like overcome that they're lovely. The thing that threw me the most is when he and Rune are being tortured and he's thinking about Bryce, but he's not thinking about Bryce the way that like Bryceriel would think about Feyre. He's not thinking about her like, this person that I love more than anything in the world, the way that I'm getting through this is I'm thinking of the sound of their voice or the way that they laugh or what it feels like in its presence. He totally goes like R-rated thoughts. He's like, this is where I want to be. And it just feels so physical and not like spiritual.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree. I feel like obviously I was extremely biased reading Hofas, but I found every intimate scene icky. But interestingly, I found a lot of other people felt the same way. Even people that didn't dislike Hunt came away from Hofas saying, I don't like Hunt anymore. I don't like him at all. Yeah. A real moment for me was when...
Or just feeling like the book wasn't very good because Bryce and Hunt weren't clicking or weren't popping. Yeah. And I find a lot of people where I say to them like, well, I think Bryce has another mate. And they're like, oh, thank God, because I didn't like that. And it didn't work for a lot of people. And I'm like, yeah, maybe that was intentional. And that like blows people's minds sometimes.
And I feel like you see people that they're like a group of never hunters. They're like people that are like, I don't care who she's with as long as it's not Hunt.
I'm kind of in that camp, to be honest with you.
I would agree with that. Well, I think there was a real moment where he actually goes, in this moment, I hate Bryce, like around the 3/4 point. And I thought, oh, wow, like that it really came from a place of hate. It wasn't even just like, I'm so frustrated at her right now, but she's also beautiful and I just want to love her and kiss her. It was like, I actually hate this person right now. I loathe her in this moment. And I just thought, oh, that is a dangerous slope right there. I could really see Hunt becoming a villain, in my opinion. I feel like he is really on that trajectory, particularly if he ends up scorned, heading down a villain route. But
well, and he's based, I mean, you can argue on the myth of Orion, and that doesn't go well. Orion dies, and there are a variety of versions, but I don't think Hunt is long term. I don't know. Sarah J Maas can do whatever she wants to, but she's not laid it out to make him a long-term character, at least not for Bryce.
No. Agreed. So shall we get into your literary analysis? I'm so excited for this. Yeah. I think so. Just for some of our longtime listeners, I think we've done this at a high level in previous episodes, but we've never dove deep because that's Nicole and I don't dive deep. We're just like, hey guys, here's all the things, and then we bring the.
I'm gonna disagree from y'all's episodes. You've dove deep. I hope I have anything new to add.
Okay. Well, that's good to know from an expert because I feel like we just kind of like summarize high level. So some of this will be kind of like a repeat, but like a little bit deeper for some of our like longtime listeners, which I'm excited for. And most of the people who love the Bryceriel episodes are just like, give it to me over and over and over again.
Like we're all consuming the same content, which is also really useful because you don't meet us in the wild. You have to find us online to find the group.
Exactly. It's like strategic. Yeah, exactly.
We'll dig in. I think what I really wanted this to be was a focus on the text and focus on the literary structure because the ship wars are so strong and people have so many opinions about who's going to end up with who, that my goal was to take theory out of it. There are so many great theories about what people think is going to happen, or what we've seen before and how that might like happen again. And I wanted to look at like just the text-based evidence. What is the language that Sarah J Maas is using? What are the archetypes? What are the symbols? What are the things that we as humans know are going to show up in stories? And so I think that was really my light bulb moment after reading the say and Lynn, whatever, being pulled across the universe to each other, was seeing all of the pieces that were put in the text that got us there. And so breaking this down to make it clear. So I think a lot of Bryceriels come in and we are going to argue they're not necessarily in game, but they are fated mates no matter what. And do I want them to be in game? Yes, I do.
And like, I think that is the position Nicole and I take a lot, is like, you can still want her to end up with Hunt, and you can still want him to end up with somebody else. And maybe that is what will happen. I think transparently, we do want them to end up together. I mean, I think we'd be pretty disappointed if they didn't. But the argument is they're fated mates. What they choose to do with that information, we don't know. And like SJM could play with the idea of rejecting the mate bond.
Yeah.
So like, we don't know what would happen, but there are seeds being laid that they are mates.
In saying that, obviously I want them to end up together. And I think that Sarah is a huge romantic fan. And I think that she will possibly get them to the precipice of letting go of the bond before it all turns around and they end up realizing that they do need to be together. Or they may explore a bit like Zodiac Academy, where they do deny the bond, and then somehow how there is no really denying it, that it ends up coming back and catching up with you anyway. So there's many, many ways that she may explore it, which is very, very interesting. But I love that, and I think it's so often what we've tried to bring this podcast is, rather than just bringing theories and ideas and possibilities, we've actually just tried to deliver facts and evidence. We are like, these things really happened in these books. Now, how you want to read into that, we've obviously read into it a certain way. Maybe you will read it differently to us, but here is the evidence, and please take with it and do what you will. And I think I love how you've brought this together in such a professional, educational way. Like, everyone who's watching today and listening, you're going to come out of this a lot smarter. Like, we're doing a course today on Sarah J Maas, and you'll be leaving here with a literary degree in all things. So we
Math verse 101.
Yes, exactly. All right, so get us started. You've obviously broken it down into, I guess, 6 areas, with the first one being archetypes. So do you want to take us through that?
Yes. And honestly, I had to cap it at 6. This could have gone on. And I was literally, each one was like 10 minutes long. I'd already cut them down. But so kind of the things that I thought were the most evidentiary. And so as far as the archetypes go, the way that I also did this is that everything builds on each other. So no one really got to see them in order if they watched them on TikTok, but it would have been useful if anyone were to go back and watch them in order, because they each kind of lead to the next piece and dive a little deeper. And so just from an archetype standpoint, you've got your Jungian archetypes, which are the concept that we humans all kind of embody these different characters, and that especially in stories, we get to learn more about ourselves and the human experience through these archetypes. We've also got Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which everybody knows the hero's journey. When you look at it, it's like things from like the Odyssey, or Tolkien, Harry Potter, everything kind of follows that same arc. And Bryce 100% follows that same arc. And so from an archetype standpoint, first, you've got Bryce. She's our hero, but she is also this light bringer. She is this seeker of truth once she decides to look for it, and the daughter of like this divine. She's got that goddess thing, kind of like Aelin has going on. And then Azriel, he is our shadow, and it doesn't mean villain. It means generally like the keeper of like what's repressed knowledge. And so I think what makes this really interesting is Azriel is our keeper of repressed knowledge. Bryce is our seeker of truth, and Azriel's blade is truth teller.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think there's a particular line which I know was the aha moment for a lot of Bryceriel shippers, which is when Bryce says to Rowan, maybe there is a knife out there for me, when they're talking about the Star Sword. And of course, we know someone who owns a very important knife, which was obviously Azriel. Okay, so let's just, for a moment, let's play devil's advocate. Because obviously, Bryce and Azriel are both quite complex characters. And some people, I mean, let's be honest, quite a few people will say, I don't like Bryce very much. They say, I don't like her. She's immature. She doesn't want to accept who she is. She's impulsive. What are your thoughts on some of, I guess, the complexities of Bryce and where she's at this point in time in the story?
Oh, so that's when you've got to, you almost want to run her through the lens of Selena and Aelin.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
100%.
I think everybody needs to grow, and Bryce hasn't gotten to grow yet, really, as a character.
No.
She's done some minor work on accepting who she is, but not really. I mean, she came back and she was like, not going to be a queen. We're going to throw this off. I'm going to not be my father's daughter, which I understand the trauma there, but she doesn't want to be who she is.
Right.
And that doesn't go well for characters in Mathverse.
No, suppressing that isn't, and she also thinks I can just give it away and suppress it, and that's all, and it's all going to be okay. And as we know, Selena Aelin tried to do the same thing, and it was only with the introduction of that character that allowed her to grow and truly understand herself, which was Rowan, that she actually started to change and transition and accept who she is. And my argument for people has often been that Bryce, that is part of the justification that Hunt is not the right person for her, and that she has not yet had her growth.
And I think Azriel's going to be big for that, because if he does embody that shadow archetype, the things that are your truths that are buried, like things that are kind of cloaked in silence, and Bryce needs to face her shadows. Who better than the Shadow Singer?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
And I know for me, and that was part of the reason I was so excited. And I was only a semi-Bryce Azriel shipper when I started reading Hope Path. I'd heard about it, thought it was cool, liked the idea of light and dark and, and light and shadows, but I didn't really think it was going to happen. And then I started reading these two characters interacting with each other. Azriel had never spoken more than he'd ever spoken before, and he'd never been so physical with anyone like he suddenly was with Bryce. And in contrast, Bryce was the same. Bryce was suddenly, opening up. She was a game player, and we saw that gameplay back and forth with the two of them constantly trying to outplay one another and going, oh, there is a really good, like, this is working here. That was what I found. But how did you find that going into that?
For sure. So, I mean, Azriel talks more than he ever has before. And you're right, he is touching her, and Azriel, who doesn't ever touch anybody. And then Bryce, who is quick to call every male character an alpha hole, doesn't with Az. She lets him rescue her. She lets him pull her to her chest. She lets him be protective. And it's so outside of character that you can't miss it. And then when she comes back to Midgard, she continues to tell Hunt when he's being an alpha hole. My favorite quote here is when we read that Truth Teller and the Star Sword are two parts of a whole. They're alpha and omega. And I think it's in contrast to Hunt being an alpha hole if Azriel is the healthy, instead of toxic masculinity, he's the non-toxic masculinity side.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So tell us a little bit, I guess, about the hero journey in the Archetypes.
Yeah. So the hero journey, they normally go through different stages. They get the call to adventure, which is what sends them off on their journey. And for Bryce, we get that when the demon attacks and Danica dies and the Horn mystery kind of happens. And then we get her stage of the refusal of the call. She doesn't really want to go on the journey. She tries to push away who she is. And then a mentor appears. And what's interesting in Midgard is that her mentor is really Danica at first. It's like Danica and Death, but it's Danica kind of. And then it really more or less transfers to Adis, which I think could be very interesting if he is Valve and what the intentions are there for her to fulfill some sort of role. But then the next stage is what's called crossing the threshold. And Bryce like literally crosses the threshold. She like pieces out of Midgar into Prithian. And then there is this stage where she moves into like this initiation. She goes through all these trials and tests in the cave, and they're physical and they're psychological, and they're all intensified with Azriel and Nesta. And she begins taking on and learning the truth. And then she comes back and she goes through this stage of like death and rebirth. And then she reaches what's called apotheosis, which is the rising of a mythic being. So it's like stepping into her divinity. And she is no longer just Bryce. She is the starborn heir. And then the stage that's called the return with the elixir. And this I don't think is complete yet because the book kind of ended here, but she's got the knowledge and she has got the power to try and heal and get the parasite out of the water and bring some kind of peace to the realm. And she carries the Star Sword and she knows what must come next.
Yeah. And let's like help people understand a little bit like what is the hero's journey. So this is a very specific way of writing, especially in fantasy, that goes as far back as the Odyssey, right? I think it's very much kind of based on that. But we can see this even in something as simple as Harry Potter, right? The call to action or the inciting event is in Harry Potter is when he's told he's a wizard, right? And he goes through all those stages. He has a lot of trial and tribulation. And then when he gets to that ascension point, right, it's when he kind of finds out that he's a Horcrux, and that's the ascension. And he has to take that knowledge and go do something with that knowledge. We see this in a King Arthur story, right? He pulls the sword from the stone, but that doesn't make him a king, right? Just doing that one action doesn't make you a hero in, you know, with a capital H. You have to go through all the points of growth and failure and trials and tribulations. And then ultimately you get to a point where you have everything that you need and now you go face the final boss, right? And Bryce hasn't done that. She hasn't learned everything. She hasn't, there has been no acceptance of her ascension. So even people who might say, oh, you know, Bryce she beat the Asteri. Number one, I would ask you, wasn't that kind of anticlimactic, that battle? And maybe wasn't that intentional?
It was the shortest major battle of any of her books. It was weird.
Right. That was not a final boss, okay? That was not a final boss. And number two, she did not use her status as the starborn heir, as an ascended, to fight that battle. And that is what is so important. She didn't use the elixir to fight it.
If we compared this to Harry Potter, we're maybe in books 1 to 4, where yes, Harry he knows that he as a baby killed, what's his name?
Voldemort.
You can't say his name.
Yeah, exactly. He who will not be named. And he's defeated a couple of times. He's defeated the snake. Then he's maybe at the Triwizard tournament, and things have just gotten really serious. And now Voldemort's come up. We're probably not even there, so we're probably still the book before that, where we haven't actually been fully introduced to the big bad yet. We're probably still at about book 3, where we're it's growing. We know more's going. We've now found out more about who Bryce really is, what her inheritance is meant to be, what her destiny is, but she isn't accepting it. She's defeated a big bad, but she's also not identified. Like, one of the big things that stood out for me through that fight was obviously Princes of Hell, like they were on her side and these creatures were going past her, and she was going, wow, these things are really scary. I'm really glad they're on our side and not who we're against, because these things are really scary. And I just thought that was just an interesting line to throw in there haphazardly with no purpose behind it. So I also wanted another big moment that I think really stands out, which to me is a moment a bit like the Surreal, is when Bryce's boss, I'm trying to think who her name is now off the top of my head. She says, the angel is waiting for you. Or she says something to that.
She does.
She does. And she's very specific.
The angel is waiting, which is so stay with the High Lord.
It is so stay with the High Lord. It is so stay with the High Lord, 100%. Well, and if you think about it, I've made this argument, I think on the internet, but maybe not on this podcast. I actually think there's a lot of similarities between Jessica and the Surreal. Because they are both, in many ways, they kind of act like that mentor a little bit for the main character, or like maybe a secondary mentor. They both have more information than they both have information that the main character needs, and they sort of drip it out at the right time, and they offer those like cryptic kind of answers.
Clues.
They both die in kind of both tragic but also very like sweet, wholesome, like everything's wrapped up kind of ways. And it's so I actually think there's a lot of similarities between them. So the fact that it's
even to
Jessica who says that is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
You just had to give me a total realization. Who's the girl in Throne of Glass that is the first person to be possessed, and she fights it and she helps them like, tear down?
Keltane? Is it Keltane? Is that how you say her name?
Yeah, it's the girl that everyone kind of hates at first, and then she's like she was like supposed to marry Dorian, I think, and like is like the rich girl that everyone hates.
Aelin gave her a cloak, just like Feyre gives Bryceriel a cloak. Yeah. And I had not put that together till this moment.
Yeah.
And she very much kind of fills that role. She tells, the 13 what's going on, and she has a very tragic death for the greater good. And
I think it's also quite interesting that they're often a character that has a lot of information that only gives across so much, that is also a little bit morally grey. Like we never quite know if they're good or bad, and we don't, but they seem to provide enough information to the main FMC for us to go, oh, they seem to be giving them hints, but are still only enough to still keep them going on their journey. As the Surreal was like, stay with the High Lord, the same way that Jessica says the angel is waiting for you, but doesn't specify Hunt, just says angel, really just leaves that one right open. I mean, I can go on a tangent here. I will try to keep it.
Bryce first says the angel, Hunt. Like she doesn't say like, oh, I need to get back to Hunt, my mate. Oh, I need to get back to Hunt. Like she has to like stop and think about him for a minute before it like sinks in. And like we're in that same world where like Rhysand dies and Feyre's like falling apart and like trying to like clutch for pieces of him. And Bryce is like, I have a mate. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. I've always said it's a bit like a boyfriend-girlfriend kind of relationship, not like a all-consuming mates kind of love connection, which is why it's always been a challenge for me.
It's not a relationship ordained by fate. It's just not, it's just not. Okay, so I think we could honestly bash Hunt and Bryce and Hunt forever. Let's get back to kind of the textual stuff, because I think that's just so interesting in some of the stuff that we haven't done. So we've talked about the hero's journey. What is kind of the next element of your analysis?
So this would be what's called like the reader-writer contract. So this is the framework that an author creates their world through, and it's the consistent pieces of their story that become promises to the reader, that become embedded in the narrative, that these things are going to demand some sort of like thematic payoff and give us some sort of resolution at the end. And in this world, her stories aren't just telling us what happens. She lays the groundwork to tell us what is going to happen. And she's done that for us using the same language that she herself has continued to evoke and through like all of her books. And J.K. Rowling did the exact same thing with Harry Potter. She laid out for us basically all of the stages that Harry was going to go through. We get the prophecy. We're going to get a lightning scar. We're going to get this mythic link between Harry and Voldemort. We're going to get the Deathly Hallows, and all of those things lead us to that payoff at the end. And
yeah, and I actually do think Harry Potter's a really great comparison. Like we'll probably keep bringing it up because it is such a classic fantasy that everyone knows. But like a reader-writer contract is. There's a prophecy that says neither can live while the other can die, right? It is the writer is establishing that Harry will kill Voldemort, right? Like if we get to the end of that book and somebody else kills Voldemort, the reader is going to be like, WTF, like, you know what I mean? Like, and that is a really clear example of a reader-writer contract that gets set up.
that actually makes me think of Game of Thrones and how that felt so unsatisfying at the end, because I think we got this whole feeling that you know, the about who was actually going to eventually kill the White Walker like king, and we end up with it just being like the little sister at the end, because I think they got so off the trajectory of this kind of reader writer contract that they kind of forgot where the story had been going and where the characters' journeys were going, and they ended up giving a really uninspiring ending that didn't even really make sense, and that's when it doesn't pay off. But I think that's something that Sarah has to date always done really, really well. We saw it obviously mainly in Throne of Glass, but possibly in Akatar as well. Can you maybe give an example of another time that Sarah has done this this sort of in the past, and how it's kind of paid off? I guess obviously Aelin would be the most obvious.
Aelin's the best example, I think. But yeah, if you look at it, I almost think Nesta. Nesta might be our best person, because we get the groundwork laid for her. And if you go back and you read A Court of Thorns and Roses, you know, Sarah J Maas was really leaning into the evil like stepsister theme a little bit more in the beginning. And so then by the time we got to Mist and Fury, we had to start building this new kind of framework for Elaine and Nesta to fit into, to continue through the rest of the story. And so it ended up being like these expectations and then kind of reversing our expectations to take it forward. And for, I'm going to say this from a business standpoint, good business and good writing means that if we're going to follow these characters, you've got to get us to a place where we relate to them, we understand their story, we can see ourselves in them, and we can see this happy ending coming. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something Sarah loves doing, is she loves taking, I guess, a villain character and flipping it and actually helping us to understand, to have these characters. And that's why I loved Silver Flame so much, because we actually get to understand Nesta and how she'd done these horrible things, but we got to understand her psychology behind it, that it didn't necessarily come from this just evil place, that there was a lot of purpose behind it. Even if it wasn't the right decision to make, it might have been part of a character journey, but it helped us to understand. And I guess Elaine, in equal, like, we've kind of got two characters in a really difficult situation where one is just stubbornly being like, I'm trying to force my dad to step up and I'm not going to do anything to make him step up. I think Elaine has possibly just kind of frozen and gone into a level of, I guess, possibly depression or denial, and hence she's just failed to even notice what's going on around her. And obviously that's probably another journey that we're potentially going to get in the next book. But as you said, with Silver Flame, we really saw Nesta's journey and had such an understanding. And that's what I love that Sarah really brings, is that complexity of character, and to be able to take a character that's potentially a villain and actually flip it and allow us to actually understand who they really are and why they did what they did.
Well, I think she introduces us to mating bonds, and she gives us prophecies, or like these prophetic weapons, this ancient myth that echoes through her stories, and this through all of the stories. And it's not her just like dressing up the story in lore. It's setting stakes with us as the reader, because we already know that these devices are going to carry meaning within her world, because she's told us they're going to carry meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She tells us that mating bonds are epic, ordained things, spiritual things.
Fate.
She tells us that they're fate, right? She tells us that they're inescapable. She tells us that they are life-changing. They help the character grow. Feyre learns to read as a result of her mating bond. That's a massive, like, personal growth. Aelin learns to trust people. Aelin loves again, right?
Yes.
Like, these are things that mating bonds help our main characters become who they're always meant to be. And if she didn't want those expectations put on the Crescent City world, then she wouldn't have connected it to the larger ecosystem of her universe. And so by connecting them, she's telling us at a very early stage, it all works the same. The magic is the same. The world is the same. Your expectations are the same. And I think that's why Hunt and Bryce do feel so flat for people is because, especially after in Crescent City 3, is because maybe in CC1, CC2, you don't yet know that they should be the same. You think you're living in a new universe, things work differently. But she tells us, and then not only that, but she doubles down on it by giving us a mating bond in Rude and Lydia,
which is so on brand.
Expectations. Yeah, who do meet those expectations. So I think it's, but she is establishing what we should expect.
Yes.
And she even does that with humans. We get that with Kale. Like as soon as he just, has to go and be healed in the southern continent, he then follows the same story arc himself. And we learn that she's going to apply the same rules to every being. It doesn't matter. Because you see people argue that, well, they're not going to be mates because he's an archangel and she's fan, so it's not offensive. She kind of shows us that mates are mates no matter where or no matter where they're coming from.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think, as you were talking about before, going back to the prophecy and the sacred weapons and things like that Sarah often uses, they always lead to a larger purpose for the entirety of the book. And to date with the Crescent City books, we have these prophecies. We have obviously the main prophecy of when, Sword and Dagger are reunited, so shall our people be. We also have the Oracle saying to Hunt, stay away from Bryce Quinlan. And today, I get to the end of
those things haven't been resolved.
No, and I'm like,
and it hasn't come back around yet, which means it's not over. We haven't addressed it. You don't just drop that and then not come back to it.
And here's what I hear all the time. This is what I continue to get in Instagram comments. Oh, but I thought CC3 was a trilogy. It doesn't. It's like, okay, just because you thought CC3 was a trilogy, which I don't know where that comes from, because I don't know that I have ever seen Sarah herself say it will just be 3 books.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
I'm like, I don't know where that is coming from in the world, but I'm like, okay, number one, we don't know that she's actually said that, but number 2, like, it doesn't change the fact that Bryce's story isn't over. Like, and, and people will say, no, we got our happy ever after. Like, their story is over, just like Farrah and Reese's was over after book 3. And I'm like, everything was resolved after 3 books. There's so many things that haven't been resolved for Bryce. Like, she hasn't actually stepped into her power.
Yeah.
She is the heir of 2 thrones and has not become an heir to anything. Like, that is not her ending. Her story is not over.
And just because Farrah and Rhysand weren't the main characters in Silver Flames, it didn't mean they ceased to exist and live in the world. Like, we still see the tension and the dynamics with them through other people, but it's still happening.
Right. And their story is still going. So even if Bryce isn't the main character in a book, which I think she will be, she still has growth to go on and a journey to follow.
Yes. And I think we can see with the Archetype world, and particularly, bringing up Rhys and Feyre, there is still a lot to go there. Obviously, Sarah opened up a new door when she did Silver Flame, because she started to introduce this idea of not just the High Lords, but actually a king, or potentially a queen. And talking, when we have Amren saying to Rhysand, you could step up and be High King. And he says no. And then she's like, I think she says something along the lines of, well, then possibly someone will take your place. Now, a lot of people at the moment theorize whether it could be Nesta, or obviously, theoretically, what we got in Hofas was the realization that it's actually Bryce should actually be High Queen. That's actually her destiny to be that. But obviously right now she turned around to Rhys and she was like, I am not a threat. She's like, I'm not a threat. I don't even want to be here. I'm going back home ASAP. I'm not a threat to you. But we definitely see a lot of tension between those 2 characters. I'm curious what your thoughts are of the sort of what we see between Rhysand and Bryce, and even Rhysand just generally as a character at this point in time. I'm going off track here, but what are some of your thoughts?
I am a consummate Rhysand apologist. I love him. I will always love him.
Me too. I will hear nothing. No slander about Rhysand.
You can't tell me anything that I can rationalize anything that Male does. I'm going to find a reason why it's okay. So I'm probably not the best person to ask, because I do think that Bryce makes some poor choices, and then I can tell you why Rhysand's weren't that bad. So.
That's all right. We need different opinions, definitely.
Yeah. So I think that their tension, I think, I think it's complicated, because I think if we look at the way that Azriel takes Bryce to the river house, he doesn't take this person that's just invaded their land to a dungeon. He takes her home. Yeah. And Rhysand, who is fiercely protective, doesn't admonish him really for doing that. So first of all,
or break into her mind.
And break into right. And we've seen him do that. I mean, you're right. He breaks so many of the things that we would expect for him facing someone who would be an enemy. We see him and Azriel kind of doing their silent communication through Bryce's eyes. We see Azriel reacting to Bryce in ways she doesn't understand. I think Rhysand knows, or he knows something. I don't know if he senses, immediately she says that rune looks like Rhysand. I don't know if he senses like they're related. I don't know what, but I'm very curious to see where this is going to go. I know there are a lot of people that think that Feyre and Rhysand might find themselves like at war with Bryce or for this king queenship, but I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go, but I do know that he doesn't act like himself around her as one would expect.
Around an enemy. He's not acting, he is not treating her like an enemy. He's treating her like a friend. He's treating her like his best friend's mate, who he's suspicious of.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Yeah, I mean, he's nicer to Bryce than he was to Nesta in the beginning.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. So is there anything else in the reader, just kind of getting us back on track a little bit, is there anything else in the reader-writer contract that we need to like break down?
Cover.
No, I think we kind of covered it. I mean, it's basically that literary contract. It's a connection. It's not arbitrary. And we're going to see those things come through. So
right.
I think that kind of covers all of it.
Okay. So what's the next one? What's the next?
Next is where it starts in my mind to actually get like really good, is the concept of duality and the mythic duality and the light and the shadow and the two pieces of a whole, and they're not in opposition, but they're in balance. And so Bryce and Azriel represent this mythic duality concept really in like its purest form. They are these two archetypes of light and shadow intention. They're designed not to oppose each other, but to come together and to integrate. And a lot of this is seen in like the really old Taoist philosophy of you've got your yin and your yang and your balance of light and dark, and then there's a little bit of each in the other. And my favorite is there was the line, and I cannot remember exactly where it was, but Azriel says, just because you do good doesn't mean you are good. And I think he struggles with that himself, but then Bryce comes back from Prythian and she sees that her light is now shadowed with dark, and there's some of it, and she sees how the shadow can shape the light. And so they become these symbols of light and shadow, but also moon and sun, stillness and movement. Azriel is always composed and restrained, and Bryce is neither of those things.
She's always in movement. She does her best thinking when she's running. She needs to think, so she goes on a run. That is like the epitome of somebody who is always in movement, somebody who is always just like go, go, go. Whereas like Azriel, if he needs to think deeply, he goes hide in his little corner,
Can I just confirm for a moment, just in case people don't understand much about duality or haven't really heard this term before, I think we've already semi-answered it, but just to confirm for people, what does that mean in its essence? Like, what does duality mean, just for people, just so that they understand?
So it's this structure of kind of two halves of a whole and two opposite pieces that are not fighting each other, but they work together to create a larger balance.
Yes.
And so they really are the perfect example of it. They're not binary. They're not two things in conflict. They are,
as you said,
one.
Like yin and yang, like light and shadow, that for every one side of the coin, there is the other side of the coin. That we really feel like we cannot have one without the other.
Yeah. You have to have good in order to understand evil. You have to have evil in order to understand good. And I think, I think this is where some people this is where, this fake mating bond has really tricked readers, because Hunt appears like he is this kind of partner or opposite of Bryce, right? Because he has lightning. And so it seems like, oh, like they go together, right? That their magic is the same. So they're like, but they need to be more different. They're not different enough. They're not integral. They're not balancing. They're not two halves of a whole. They're too much the same.
This was the first thing that made me click about Bryce and Azriel, because I thought about how lightning and starlight don't really blend that well together. But when I was like starlight and shadow, I was like, oh, hang on now, that is much more of a yin and yang, something that would be much more something that Sarah would explore.
Yeah. And part of it is that they need to be equal. And Hunt is not Bryce's equal. We also know that Fate and Mate are equals, and that's one of the reasons they get pulled together is that balance. And we even find out, well, if he was made to be a battery for her, he can't be an equal. He's meant to serve her and charge her up. And then Regulus tells us that he's her knight and nothing more. Now, I know he's a jerk, but there's no reason for him to say that. It doesn't provide any information unless to give us more detail.
Yes.
And
I can't say how many times I hear Hunt say, oh, you just never know what Bryce is going to do. She's always the master game player. We never know what she's going to do next. So she's always surprising Hunt. He can't predict her, and it actually frustrates him sometimes because she is outplaying him so much that he gets frustrated that he can't keep up with her. Whereas when she is suddenly in with Azriel, we see the two of them outplay each other, and we actually see literal excitement out of, like, when Bryce tricks Azriel to let go of her hand, she's like, oh, look behind you, and then he does, and then she darts over we see like this is Azriel, who in advance, like months in advance of the snowball fight, he is game planning. They are both master game planners, and I think that just that in itself is so exciting for me, that I just need these two characters to be in a room together just to continue to see what they do with each other.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's going to be a phenomenally fiercely high chemistry impact showdown when they find themselves back together somehow, and I don't know in what way, but yeah, I think Hunt is also, he's kind of emotionally immature. He really is. He's a little self-absorbed. A lot of what we hear is not his support of Bryce. It's how Bryce is making him sometimes feel less about himself, or like does that make sense? Like he's just not an equal being, and he doesn't look at them. He doesn't look at her like an equal being.
No.
Yes.
And there's a difference between being like, oh, I'm so lucky to have this person as my mate, and feeling like they're not your equal. Like, I don't think that Rhysand would ever feel that he was not Feyre's equal. I don't think Rowan would ever feel like he's not Aelin's equal. I think they would be like, wow, this person's amazing, and I'm like so lucky, but it's like inherent that they're equals. And that is just, there is not that inherence. And in fact, SJM makes a point to point out that that's not the case many times by having him think about that.
Right.
Okay, so we've got duality. What's the next one?
So kind of more in duality, you've got some tropes of this grumpy sunshine. So there's a little bit of that there that we already know from Hades and Persephone, when you've got your god of death and the goddess of spring. There's a lot of similarities there. You've got Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. My favorite one that I've realized is Luke and Lorelai are very much rough and perky. And so I think Azriel and Bryce fit this relationship trope that we already have come to look for and understand. And so they each also work to be the catalyst for the other's growth in those other stories. And I think we're going to see Bryce and Azriel do the same thing. And they said in Hofast, such light and darkness, what is it? The power lay in the meeting of the two, and then the darkness shapes the light. So yeah, that was kind of, I think, a really big turning point, that they're completing the circuit. They're not opposite ends. So
exactly. And I think to lay those
blades as soul mirrors.
To lay those seeds, just to be speaking so much about light and darkness, just those lines, just outlines, as you said, it's coming back to read a contract. We're laying those foundations that this is an important part of this story, this light and darkness and the balance of the two, and heading into Dusk Court, which is almost a merging of these two things that we kind of see as readers where this story is going. And that might take us into, I think, the next stage of your mythic duality, which is Dusk Court. Do you want to tell us a little bit
about Dusk Court? Yes. Okay. So when I sat down and realized this, it was another one of those little epiphany moments, because dusk is not just like the end of the day. It's this moment where the night and the day meet, where light and dark touch. It is symbolically this like sacred threshold. It's a union of those two halves. Yes. It gives us this like tension that's resolved together, and it's not nightfall. It's not daytime. It's this in between. And so if Bryce and Azriel are already our two pieces, and they're representing your light and your dark, your day and your night together, and they go hand in hand into the Dusk Court, they are now a sacred union in the threshold. And so that is amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, dusk is the end of the day and the beginning of the night, right? It is a hand holding of light and dark, and they enter the Dusk Court together. And I mean, we've mentioned this so many times on this podcast. We talk about it constantly, but like the only other people we've seen enter that prison holding hands are fated mates. So you know, there's something important there. There's something important going on about holding hands as you enter that place, as you cross that threshold. And we get to see that, you know, very intentionally, I think, by Sarah J Maas.
It's a consistent place of transformation for each of our fated mates. And as soon as it made me think of, my daughter's been very into Frozen 2 lately. And like Olaf walks into the enchanted forest, and he was like, all I know is that an enchanted forest is a place of transformation. I don't know what that means, but I can't wait to see what it does to each of us. And I feel like the Dusk Court is that, and I feel like the prison is that for everyone in Mathverse. Is they're going to enter, and who are they going to be when they come out on the other side? And who are they going to be with when they come out on the other side?
Exactly. But I think it's very foretelling, I feel like going too quickly because I've been obsessed with it for the last 2 weeks. Have you watched K-pop Demon Hunters on Netflix?
No, but I've watched y'all's videos about it, and so now I know what I need to do tomorrow.
You have to.
Especially if you are into Sarah J Maas and you're into Bryce and Azriel and light and darkness and demons and like goodness, like just that duality is really important in this kids movie. It makes no sense, but it is, and it was just everything I needed. So definitely get your daughter and go watch it, because it's
so I'm glad to know
it's perfect for a 4-year-old, I think.
Okay, perfect. See, I was like, I just assumed it was going to be more adult. So the fact
it is a kids movie. Nicole and I are just obsessed with a kids movie. So
that's okay.
It is absolutely a kids movie.
Kids movie.
Kids will love it.
Yeah, it's a kids movie, but it's got elements that like the parents can appreciate and understand, and there's actually a much bigger story, but it'll probably completely go over the kids' heads. They'll just love the music and the light story, but yeah, it just the way it explores characters and just what we want out of romanticy so much is really, it's just addictive. So yeah, highly recommend that. But I have gone off track. Okay, so we've got the Dusk Court symbolism, and obviously, as you say, the meaning of light and dark, how that is so symbolic, and how we know that there's a lot here for the future of what these future books are going to talk about. What's next?
So from there, there's the Alpha and Omega piece, which we talked on a little bit earlier, and Bryce and Azriel being the beginning and the end, and kind of just a continued look at duality, but from that specific concept of Alpha and Omega, but also made and unmade, and that you need both blades to finish creating this circuit. And it really becomes this place that if Bryce and Azriel represent this whole, and we've got made and unmade on one end, we've got Alpha and Omega, we've got Bryce carrying this divine legacy and being this builder of change, and we've got Azriel as an Omega, and he is the unmade and the shadowed, and And if we look at that, it basically becomes like this microcosm of the Sarah J Maas world and becomes this axis that everything is turning on, are these two opposite ends. And so I think there is something here that's going to set up the dynamics for everything else to come between the two of them.
And I want to add something here because this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I have to give credit where it's due. Emily's theories on Instagram and TikTok. I'm pretty sure that this is the first person who had talked about this. It's hard sometimes to remember like where I first read something. You know, but number one, we know that there's evidence to suggest that the starborn power is from the Asteri, that power is Asteri made, that it is that's sort of why they want the first fly, and that's what it is. And at the other side of that, we sort of think, or you know, there's evidence to suggest, right, that Azriel is somehow connected to the princes of hell. I mean, his name is Azriel.
Oh yeah, right.
That he is, that his father is potentially a prince of hell, or he is a prince of hell. And I think there's a lot of people out there who think that like this larger Sarah J Maas story is it's really about this battle between the Asteri and the princes of hell. And that's really what has driven the universe to become what it is and how it is. And because and we know for sure that the Asteri are running from something, that something was like destroying their world. And so if you think about the idea that Bryce is somehow connected to the Asteri through being starborn, Azriel is connected to the princes of hell or the Vogue, that is like this really interesting kind of alpha and omega setup that is tied to like the two forces of the universe. And when the two of them come together and there's a mating bond, that is fate or destiny kind of saying, this battle that's been going on for eons has to come to a head, and the two of you have to sort of make peace. And what they'll probably do is end up fighting both Asteri and Vogue, right? But it's just yet another really interesting kind of like alpha and omega within the universe of Sarah J Maas. I'm really
fascinating. I hadn't heard that, so now I know what I'm going to go read.
And I'm doing this theory, like I'm watching it because I didn't prep this like at all, and I literally read these slides like 5 weeks ago or something, you know, like 3 weeks ago, and like there's like this tiny little thing in my head. So
I know there's a theory there's a bit of a theory I shared, which is kind of saying that it's setting up almost for another Star Wars, for this like intergalactic war that would potentially be between the Asteri and the Valg, and that potentially we've got Prithian stuck right in the middle, having to kind of defend itself and possibly come and be part of it. And this theory talked about how they are kind of like the Jedi and things like that. But I think we're definitely getting to this. We're looking at a universe, a cross-universe kind of battle. This is growing into something huge. And I think that's why we're having to wait such a long time for the next Sarah J Maas book, because it's going to take us to whatever this next thing is, that it's going to be pretty big and epic, and hence it's taking us some time to get it where it needs to be.
And if I take off my not literary analysis hat for a moment and put on my content strategy and marketing hat, it's a really good thing for a publisher for you to bring, because now your readers want to read every book from every series from your author, because they know it's all going to converge into this one.
Right. And that's where, like, I mean, Nicole and I have always really believed that we actually aren't going to get the full crossover until a different series. It's going to be this like Twilight of the Gods series, because from a marketing perspective, that makes the most sense. It allows each universe to stand on its own, so readers can enter at any point. But then still drives, I have to read all these other series before I can go read this new epic, exciting series. And it's, you know, there's a reason she's a best-selling author.
I was gonna say, can you imagine the thought process it would have to take to do that? Like, her brain amazes me. I can't even imagine. I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone what I wrote in a book 15 years ago.
And, you know, I think people forget she published Throne of Glass when she was very young. She's been in the publishing industry for a very long time. She clearly wants to be successful, or she wouldn't have continued to kind of do things in the way that she did them. She has a business brain in addition to a creative brain. And so I think that is impacting how things operate, and it's fine, but these are very much both creative and business decisions that she's making jointly.
But I think what's been really exciting with her is I think from the beginning she has had this plan for these 4 series. I don't know if you know much about Sarah J Maas and her history, but what a lot of long-term theorists have seen is she had a Pinterest. She had 4 Pinterests for years and years, and she deleted them around the time that she created Silver Flame. And they were basically one was Throne of Glass, the next one was Akatar, the next one was Crescent City, and the final one was Twilight of the Gods. And she filled these things up with heaps of beautiful art and things, and so many pieces that we see that have come together in the stories that we have. So obviously our theory is that the next one is going to be Twilight of the Gods, and we actually are also seeing that crossover. And as you say, from a marketing perspective, it's really exciting, but I also just think Sarah's just also done it just from a passion perspective. I think she loves the idea of even what we've seen with Marvel's Avengers Endgame, that sort of thing, where we see all of it merge together to make this epic battle. And I think she's obviously wanted to create that, but also to have love stories and romance and epic mates all thrown in there as well, which is why we're so excited, because we are obviously now reaching that point where we're going to go to the next level, which is very, very exciting. So
it is exciting, and I was not a fan before 2 years ago, so I didn't see the Pinterest, but I love when people post on Reddit. I'm also fascinated that they've hung on to these images this long to go back and prove the puzzle and put it together. And so I love all the pictures of clearly Azriel and clearly Bryce together. It's
together for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alpha and Omega. So we talked about that. What's the next one?
We can move to metonymy, which is the concept of basically objects that are representing and standing in for a person. So a phrase that I've used is the crown standing for the king, the Oval Office for the president. But it's this idea that almost personifies an object, but so much more than that is a true symbol of the person's being. And this is a big thing.
Maybe some modern examples or some other examples, right? I mean, Arthur's sword is metonymy, and actually Harry's scar in some ways becomes metonymy in Harry Potter. It's part of him, but it is also its own object outside of itself, and it has its own iconography and really does stand for him and his spirit. So it's very, very symbolic, but that's a couple other examples for folks who maybe.
And I think the thing that's really interesting about that Harry example is we always think that scar, we kind of go, oh, that scar is part of the connection to Voldemort, and that's kind of where it is. But of course, we end up finding out that there's actually a lot more complexity to it, that it's just a piece of this bigger puzzle, that we actually find out that Harry is a Horcrux, and that's why he's got part of Voldemort in him, and that's part of the journey of understanding that. But I guess that kind of leads a little bit into the objects we see in Crescent City and Hofas.
Yeah, and Aelin Goldrin does the exact same thing for her. So it is this piece of her being that when they're in battle, it screams out with her. It's this symbol of it's got the red ruby, and it's her fire, her transformation, her sacrifice. It's this symbol of her stepping into who she is as a queen. And Gwydion is the exact same for Bryce. It's her identity made into this tangible thing, and it glows for her, and it chooses her, and we know that it confirms her starborn power. And it's not because she just claims it, she is it.
And Truth Teller is Azriel.
And Truth Teller Azriel is this blade of silence. It is shadowed. It is forged in his trauma, which I said that so with a smile on my face, but I think it's because it's so indicative of who he is. And Truth Teller doesn't just belong to as just like what it is as, and that I think is whereas the knife, there's a knife out there for me that Bryce says to Rowan. The first time that Feyre meets Azriel, she says he would be the one to look out for, the knife in the dark.
Yes.
And I mean, these objects are symbols of the people. Why would, if they are symbolizing and kind of standing in for that person, and they are themselves a pair, why would those two people not be a pair? This is for me one of the most obvious. Like, how could you possibly think they're not
supposed
mates?
to be together? Yeah,
when
right,
you see when you understand the objects and the importance of the objects, and that the objects are connected to a prophecy about like being united and being together and our people being together, and like how like connecting that to the symbolism of Bryce and Azriel being connected. It's just
but
so
also knowing
weird.
that it's not just about the actual object itself, but who wields that object, who that object
Yes.
is made for. We know that Nesta obviously has the sword that she made. That's her sword now. Like but it also has to be wielded by her. If she doesn't wield it, it doesn't really hold the same power. It doesn't work. Like I know a few people go, oh, Gwyn is actually going to, and now that Bryce has handed off that star sword, Gwyn is going to somehow inherit it and get it, and she's going to go on this whole trajectory. But I just like, that's impossible because it's not her prophecy. It's not her destiny.
Yeah.
And I think we even saw
it doesn't stand for Gwyn. It stands for Bryce, you know.
It stands for Bryce. Yeah. Well, it was like, what was Dorian's sword? Damaris? That just because Aelin had it for a while didn't make it Aelin's. Like, just because King Arthur sets Excalibur down and walk away, it doesn't mean he's no longer King Arthur. It's like, it's the piece that represents him. It's not. Yes. And when Nesta gets the Star Sword, it doesn't sing for her. It doesn't, glow for her. It doesn't have the same reaction that it does for Bryce.
And I think there's a really interesting moment in Hofas, which I think sometimes gets overlooked, that I think was a lot of foreshadowing, which is when she kind of escapes the room and she ends up surrounded by these monsters in kind of the cave system, like at the very beginning. And she kind of escapes herself, and they all end up parting for her. And she actually feels this like long cape and crown kind of fall upon her head, and we see, I guess, the introduction to realizing that it's choosing her as their queen, and they're all almost bowing to her. And in that very moment, it's probably the first time that Bryce starts to realize her destiny of who she's meant to be. Do you have any thoughts on, I'm assuming you remember this moment, and maybe what your thoughts are around it?
I think it's just another confirmation of being in the prison is that place of transformation and stepping into who you are and stepping into your destiny. Yeah. And so I think it's just a further symbol of that. And the sword is another marker to us as a reader, and another part of that reader-writer contract that we already know is going to always mean something more. And so, yeah, I think it's all pulling together.
And Sarah literally, on her website, as one of her blurbs, she has for Rhysand, like, there you are, I've been looking for you. And then she has the star, the sword and the dagger, and that they weren't just humming out, they were singing or whatever it was. Singing. Like, yeah, that major line. And why did she put that in there? It is not, it cannot just be about a random sword and dagger. We've had this introduction that there's something going on between these two weapons, this pull towards them, particularly when Azriel and Bryce are in the proximity and they are holding them, but we don't yet understand what that is all about.
I think that's also a question that I got 1,000 times on TikTok was, well, the reason that they were pulled together is because we're told that the sword pulls to the dagger. So ergo, that's what it was. There's so much more there. And
well, and
it'd be so sad for you that that's all you want to see.
Every other mate has had something to hide the bond. So there's Bargain with Rhys and Feyre. There's the Karen bond with Aelin and Rowan. I don't know if Nesta and Cassian have something to hide their bond, actually. The training. Yeah. And I mean, there are people who don't think that they're mates, so that we could dive into that. But so like, of course, there's these daggers are hiding the bond, just like every other pair has had something hide it. So if I've been counting right, I think we just did 5 and there's one more left. Is that?
No, I think we got 2 more left. So let's go through them quickly.
Just quickly, because I can see here you've also got about the prophecy and Bryce perhaps misreading the prophecy. Do you want to share about that quickly?
I do, which means I want to get to my notes because the quotes are like critical.
Great.
They really are. They're like everything. I'm like, I'm not going to misquote them.
Yes. I do have it here in front of me. I could always say it.
Okay, if go for it while I find my notes.
You said about in the notes that like when Knife and Sword are reunited, and Bryce obviously at this point in time is thinking that she's fulfilled this prophecy. She's got to the end of Hofast and she said, amazing, I have fulfilled my prophecy. I've reunited the sword and the knife. Tick, tick, I've fulfilled the prophecy. It's done. Yeah. But of course, our thoughts are there could be a bit more to this. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I think we already know that prophecies in literature generally mean more than what we get on surface level. I think it is so Bryce to decide that the prophecy isn't what it means, it's whatever she wants it to mean. And the Greeks would call that a real lack of hubris, and I think that's going to come back to her. Yeah. But if we look at the prophecy, so like when Knife and Sword are reunited, so shall our people be. And then she's like, so I reunited some people, and so done. And the Autumn King, when he says, you don't know anything about that prophecy, you know as little about it as you do your own true nature, is big.
That's huge. That's huge. Yeah.
I have so many complex feelings about the Autumn King. He says like on the one hand, he seems so evil, but then on the other hand, I feel like he understood a lot that Bryce didn't understand and didn't comprehend. And even that when she returned to Crescent City, she landed at his house was just really, really random. And I still don't quite understand that either. But for me, he's a complex character because I feel like he knows more about this than we currently know as readers. And I wonder what we're going to find out in the future. And I think that there's complexities there that I really want to understand more.
Well, and the language in itself is when the Knife and Sword are reunited, the language is very passive. There's no specific subject it's talking. There's no like agent. There's no like command to it. It's got that setup that we know from mythic prophecy. It's not just like this like tactical phrase for two blades to come back together. It doesn't also demand any of that narrative payoff that we know from the reader-writer contracts. It gives us something that tells us like transformation is coming. So I think then the other question becomes though, what does the our people part mean? And Bryce assumed she was like Midgard and Prithian, done. But I don't know if it's not more than that. I don't know if it's not, is our people Starborn people? Is our people
Dusk. Is it the Fae
those that are made and unmade?
That have been scattered because of the Asteri and the Vogue? Is it the Vogue and the Asteri? Is it the two aspects of the Alpha and Omega? Is it the Vogue and Asteri? And maybe there is some kind of maybe they have some kind of shared history and they've split off and now they've been battling each other across time and century. I mean, it could be so much more epic than what we think it is.
I think it's at least Dusk Court. It's at least all the people that got lost to Crescent City from Dusk Court. At least we need them to come back and for them to reunite. Not just Bryce's mum and dad being like, hey, we popped in and said hi and made friends, like a true reuniting. And I think that is still come possibly in Twilight of the Gods. All right, let's go and
keep on going through.
Okay, but you know what? We're actually going to finish up there because we are going to bring this to you in 2 episodes, not just one, because we cannot fit this all into one episode. So
much to discuss.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Meghan. We are so excited to bring you the part 2 of this. And obviously, listeners, watchers, let us know what you think. Do you have thoughts? Do you have questions? Do you want us to bring Meghan back and answer more of your Bryce and Azriel questions? But we will bring part 2 to you very, very soon. So thank you so much for listening and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.